The morning began the way most quiet mornings do, softly, with the faint hum of rain against the windows and the low sigh of wind weaving through the trees. The world outside looked peaceful, but inside her small apartment, Emma Hayes felt the kind of stillness that comes after too much noise, the silence left behind when life has said too many hard things. Her coffee had gone cold again. She didn't notice until she tried to take a sip, grimaced softly, and set the cup down beside her laptop. Another unfinished morning. Another day she didn't quite know how to begin. The rain outside pressed gently against the glass, and for a moment she imagined it washing everything away. The doubts, the disappointments, the invisible ache that had followed her for months. Emma had always been the kind of person who looked like she had everything together. Her coworkers admired her calmness, her quiet smile, her way of making even the busiest days seem organized. But what no one knew was how heavy her heart had become. How often she looked out the window, wondering if her life would ever feel full again. It wasn't heartbreak in the dramatic sense. There was no big scene, no betrayal, no shouting, just two people who slowly drifted apart until silence became more familiar than conversation. Her long relationship ended in a single, polite sentence. "Maybe we've both changed." And she had simply nodded, too tired to argue with something that already felt true. Since then, her days had blurred together. Work, errands, quiet evenings that stretched too long, and the soft ache of missing something she couldn't quite name. But somewhere beneath all that loneliness, there was still a spark of something she didn't talk about. Hope. It hid itself in small moments: the scent of rain, the sound of an old song, the color of dawn spreading through her curtains. Emma wouldn't have called it a dream exactly, but sometimes she wished for something gentle to find her again. Not excitement or grand romance, but something simple. A connection that felt real, honest, and kind. She didn't believe in fate, not really. But that morning, as she tied her hair into a loose bun and grabbed her keys, she felt a strange pull in her chest, a quiet nudge that said, "Go anyway." The rain had softened to a drizzle when she stepped outside. Her car was parked under a row of maple trees, their leaves glistening with tiny beads of water. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and for a brief second, everything felt almost normal. But then, as she reached the first traffic light, the engine gave a faint rattle, an uncertain sound, like a sigh. The red light stretched on, the rain grew steadier, and the air inside the car felt suddenly too small. When the light turned green, she pressed the gas pedal, and nothing happened. The car shuddered once, then went silent. Behind her, a few horns blared impatiently. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried again, but the key turned uselessly in the ignition. The sound of the rain grew louder, matching the rhythm of her pulse. "Please," she whispered under her breath. "Not today." She took a deep breath, blinking fast to keep the tears from falling. It wasn't just the car, it was everything. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the quiet fear that maybe life had stopped moving forward. And then, in the middle of all that stillness, a knock on the window startled her. Emma turned her head. A man stood outside, holding an umbrella. His hair was damp, his jacket darkened by the rain. He wasn't wearing a uniform or anything official, just a gray sweater, jeans, and a quiet look of concern. "Hey," he said gently, his voice muffled through the glass. "Are you okay?" For a moment she hesitated. In a world that often felt rushed and cold, kindness from a stranger felt almost unreal. She lowered the window halfway. "My car," It just stopped. He nodded, his expression calm but warm. Mind if I take a look? Something in his tone, steady, kind, without pressure, made her trust him. She nodded. Within moments, he was by the hood, checking connections, glancing back occasionally to make sure she was all right. The rain continued to fall around them, a soft gray curtain that made the world feel smaller, gentler. After a while, he returned to her window, smiling faintly. Looks like the battery gave up on you. But don't worry, I called a tow truck. It's on its way. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly, surprised. He shrugged. Guess I was meant to walk this way today. There was no grand moment, no spark of lightning between them, just a simple exchange of warmth on a cold, rainy morning. But something in Emma's chest loosened. For the first time in months, the weight inside her heart felt a little lighter. The man, whose name she didn't yet know, offered his umbrella while they waited. He stood beside her in the drizzle, talking softly about nothing and everything. And as the tow truck finally arrived, Emma caught herself thinking a thought she hadn't dared to in a long time. Maybe life still has small surprises left for me. She didn't know it yet, but that quiet morning, the one that began with rain and an empty heart, was about to change her life forever. For days after the rainy morning, Emma found herself thinking about the stranger with the umbrella. His name, she later learned, was Ryan Carter, a photographer who had recently moved to town. He had a calmness about him that reminded her of the sea on a windless day. They crossed paths again unexpectedly. A week later, at the same corner cafe she had visited for years but never truly noticed. He was sitting by the window, with his camera resting beside a cup of coffee. When he looked up and saw her, his face lit with quiet recognition. "Hey, car trouble lady," he teased softly, and Emma couldn't help but laugh. It was the kind of laughter that felt new in her throat, like sunlight after a long stretch of clouds. As they talked, something gentle began to stir in her heart, not loud or sudden, but like the steady return of spring. Still, even as she smiled, a part of her carried echoes from the past, echoes that never fully left her. There was once someone else. Years ago, when Emma had first moved to the city, she met Daniel, a kind man with a thoughtful mind and a quiet love for books. They had met in a library, reaching for the same worn copy of a poem collection. He had stepped back and smiled. "You first," he said. From that day on, they shared small pieces of their worlds, coffee breaks that stretched into hours, inside jokes, soft glances that needed no words. For a long time, it felt easy, familiar, safe. Emma used to believe love was about stillness, about finding someone who fits so neatly into your life that nothing needed to change. But time has a way of revealing what comfort hides. Daniel's life began to drift in another direction. A new job, new friends, fewer late-night talks. Emma tried to hold on gently, not wanting to be the kind of person who begged for closeness. But love, she learned, sometimes fades not because of anger, but because of distance too quiet to notice at first. The last time they spoke, it was raining, much like the days she met Ryan. Daniel had called from a new city, his voice warm but tired. "You'll be okay. You always are." And she was. But sometimes being okay isn't the same as being whole. Now, sitting across from Ryan in the cozy cafe, those old memories pressed softly at the edges of her mind, not to hurt her, but to remind her who she had become because of them. Ryan spoke about his photography, how he traveled through small towns, capturing people's stories through candid, unguarded moments. He said, "I like catching life in between. Not the big things, just the quiet ones people overlook." Emma nodded. "Maybe that's where the real stories are." He smiled.
You sound like someone who's lived a few of them. She didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked out the window, where rain traced long silver lines across the glass. Maybe, she said softly. Some stories just don't end the way we think they will. Ryan didn't press. He just sipped his coffee and gave her a look of quiet understanding, the kind that asked nothing and offered comfort without words. That night, after she got home, Emma sat by the window again. The city lights blurred in the drizzle outside, and she found herself thinking about how strange time was, how people could walk in and out of your life, leaving pieces of themselves behind, like bookmarks in a story. Daniel's memory no longer hurt the way it used to. It simply lingered, an echo of something that once was, shaping how she saw the world. And in a quiet, unexplainable way, meeting Orion had reminded her that it was okay to remember without holding on. She thought about his words. I like catching life in between. Maybe that's what kindness really was, the space in between what ended and what might begin again. A few days later, Emma found a small note slipped under the door of her apartment building's nail room. It was written on the back of a photography flyer. Hey Emma, there's a local art exhibit this weekend. I'll be showing some photos. No pressure, but I think you'd like the stories behind them. Ryan. She smiled as she read it, the corners of her heart lifting slightly. She didn't know why she felt nervous. Perhaps because it had been a long time since someone had invited her into their world without expecting anything in return. As she tucked the note into her jacket pocket, the memory of Daniel's voice echoed faintly once more. You'll be okay. And she realized he had been right. She was okay, just in a different way than she once imagined. Because sometimes the heart doesn't need to be fixed, it just needs to be reminded that it can still feel. That night, Emma stood by her window again, the reflection of the city glowing softly behind her. The rain was falling lightly, as if the world was breathing in peace. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone in it. Somewhere out there, a stranger with a gentle smile had already begun to change something inside her, quietly, kindly, and without even knowing it. The weekend came quietly, wrapped in soft clouds and the smell of early spring rain. Emma almost didn't go to the art exhibit. She stood by her door for a long time, keys in hand, caught between comfort and curiosity. It would have been easier to stay home, to let the moment pass, but something inside her whispered that maybe this was one of those rare chances life offers without explanation. When she arrived, the small gallery buzzed with a gentle kind of energy. Calm conversations, low music, the faint scent of coffee from the stand near the entrance. Photographs lined the white walls, each one capturing the kind of beauty people often overlook. A child laughing beside a puddle, an old man reading under a streetlight, a woman holding flowers at a bus stop. And then, at the far end of the room, she saw him. Ryan stood by a photo display, talking to a visitor with quiet enthusiasm. His expression carried that same calm warmth she remembered, the one that made people feel seen, not just noticed. Emma felt a sudden rush of something she couldn't name, not surprise, not excitement, more like recognition, as though seeing someone she'd known in another lifetime. He spotted her almost instantly. His eyes softened in that familiar way before a small smile tugged at his lips. He excused himself from the conversation and walked toward her. Hey, he said, voice light but genuine. You came. I did. I wasn't sure if I would, but I'm glad I did. For a moment, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt full, like a quiet conversation of its own. Ryan gestured towards one of the photographs. That's my favorite, he said.
Emma stepped closer. The image showed a woman standing in the rain, holding a broken umbrella, laughing up at the sky. The light had caught her face perfectly. Not flawless, but real, alive, human. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "There's something hopeful about it." Ryan nodded. "I took it last year. That was the day I realized I didn't want to take perfect pictures anymore. I wanted to take true ones." Emma looked at him, sensing the weight behind his words. She spends so much time trying to be perfect that we forget how to be true. He met her gaze, and for a moment, something gentle passed between them. Understanding, empathy, maybe even a shared kind of loneliness. They walked together through the gallery, stopping to talk about each photo. The more they spoke, the more Emma felt that quiet spark of peace return. Not the rush of falling for someone, but the comfort of finding someone who understood the language of quiet hearts. As they reached the end of the exhibit, Ryan hesitated before asking, "Do you have time for a walk? There's a park nearby. It's nice after the rain." Emma hesitated only a second before nodding. "I'd like that." The evening air was cool, touched with the scent of wet grass and blossoms just beginning to bloom. They walked side by side, not rushing, just letting the rhythm of their steps fill the space between them. At one point, Ryan said softly, "You know, I almost didn't stop that day when your car broke down. I was already running late for something. But then I saw you sitting there, and something told me I should." Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe it was just the rain." He chuckled. "Maybe, but I'm starting to think it was something else." They stopped near a bench overlooking a small pond. Ducks floated lazily across the water, and the fading light turned everything gold. Emma sat down, pulling her coat closer. "I used to come here a lot," she said, "when things got hard. It's quiet, and the world feels softer here." Ryan nodded. "I get that. Sometimes silence is the only place that listens." His words lingered in the air, tender and true. Emma glanced at him, at the way his hands rested calmly, at the lines of gentleness in his expression. She didn't feel the ache of the past anymore. What she felt now was something quieter, maybe gratitude. Gratitude for second chances that didn't come as grand gestures, but as small, steady moments that felt like home. As the sky deepened into dusk, Ryan turned to her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy these days?" The question caught her off guard. It wasn't simple, but it wasn't heavy either. She took a moment before answering. She said, "I'm learning to be. Some days are easier than others, but I think that's what happiness really is. Not a constant feeling, just small moments when the world feels right." Ryan smiled softly. "Then I hope today counts as one of those days." Emma looked at him and nodded. "It does." And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt completely present, not lost in the past, not worried about the future. Just here. Sitting beside a man whose kindness had once turned a rainy morning into something she would never forget. She didn't know where life would take them from here, but in that moment, she understood something important, that sometimes hearts find each other not because they're searching, but because they're ready to be found again. The days that followed felt softer somehow. Emma didn't notice it at first, how her mornings no longer felt heavy, how her coffee didn't grow cold before the first sip. Something in her life had quietly shifted, like a window had opened in a room that had been closed for far too long. Ryan and Emma continued to meet, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the park, sometimes only for a few minutes between their busy days. They never called it friendship or anything else. It just was. A connection that grew quietly, rooted not in expectation, but in understanding. One evening, the city sky glowed with the orange haze of sunset. Emma met Ryan by the old bridge near the river, a place they'd begun visiting often. The world felt peaceful there. The steady rhythm of water below, the distant laughter of strangers passing by. Ryan leaned on the railing, camera slung over his shoulder. "You know," he said softly, "I've taken hundreds of photos since I moved here, but there's still something about rainy days I can't stop chasing. Maybe it's because they remind me that beauty doesn't always need sunlight." Emma smiled gently. "You've always been good at finding meaning in simple things." He turned to her, a quiet thought resting in his eyes. "I think that's because I used to miss a lot of them." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He hesitated before answering. "Before I came here, my life was busy. I was always on the move, chasing the next project, the next story, the next photograph. I thought that's what success was. But I started to realize I wasn't really seeing anything anymore. Or anyone." Emma listened, her heart softening with each word. "I guess," Ryan continued, "that morning when I saw you sitting in your car, something about it stopped me. You looked lost, but not broken, like someone trying to find her way again." He paused, eyes lowering slightly. "And I think part of me needed to remember what it looked like to care again." His words lingered in the air, fragile and honest. Emma looked down at the water, watching the way the sunset reflected in ripples that shimmered like gold. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she spoke her truth. "I think I forgot how to let people care about me. After things ended with Daniel, I promised myself I'd be fine alone. And I was. But somewhere along the way, I stopped letting anyone close enough to remind me what kindness feels like. Until you." Ryan's gaze lifted to hers, gentle and steady. They didn't move closer. They didn't need to. The moment wasn't about closeness. It was about clarity. Two people standing side by side, finally brave enough to speak what had stayed unspoken. Emma smiled faintly. "It's strange, isn't it? How one act of kindness can change so much." He nodded. "It changed both of us, I think." The evening light dimmed slowly, wrapping the bridge in soft shades of gray and silver. A calm silence fell between them, not empty, but full of unspoken gratitude. After a while, Ryan said, "I've been offered a photography assignment. It's out of town, just for a few months." Emma felt her heart shift, not with sadness exactly, but with the ache of knowing that even good things sometimes ask to be let go. "That's wonderful," she said sincerely. "You've worked hard for this." He gave a small nod. "It is, but I'll miss this. Our talks, the way this city feels lighter somehow when you're around." She looked at him, her eyes warm and calm. "Maybe that's the point, Ryan. Maybe we were meant to meet just long enough to remind each other what gentleness looks like." He smiled, that same soft smile she had first seen through the rain. "Maybe you're right." They stood there quietly, listening to the hum of the city, the soft rhythm of the river below. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded paper. She said, "I wanted to give you something." Ryan unfolded it carefully. It was a short note, written in her delicate handwriting. "For the stranger who reminded me that kindness still exists and that hearts can heal, quietly." He looked at her, eyes glistening just slightly. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me be part of your story." Emma smiled. "And thank you for walking into mine." When Ryan left a week later, he sent one last picture. It arrived in her inbox on a rainy morning. A picture of a bridge bathed in golden light, the same one where they'd talked. Beneath it was a short message. "Some people don't stay forever, but they stay long enough to change the way you see the world." Emma stared at the image for a long time, her heart quiet but full. She didn't feel lonely anymore, just grateful. The rain continued to fall outside her window, gentle and familiar. The same rain that had brought a stranger to her door months ago. And as she watched it, Emma finally understood what it meant to be transformed. Not by love in the way she once imagined, but by kindness, the kind that arrives softly, stays briefly, and leaves you better than it found you. Not every story ends with forever. Some people come into our lives only for a moment, but in that moment, they leave something that never fades. For Emma, it wasn't love that changed her. It was kindness. A quiet reminder that even after loss, hearts can heal, and life can still surprise us in the gentlest ways. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it, because sometimes a single act of kindness is all it takes to change another life too.